8. And I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GBNews.
Hello, it's 8 o'clock. I'm Alastair Stewart. On the show tonight, no further COVID measures this side of Christmas, but the hospitality sector gets £1 billion. We ask some tough questions. People smugglers bang to rights, but still their customers come. And of an old friend this New Year's Eve. But who designed the beauty that houses it? All of that coming up, but first a news update with Polly Middlehurst.
Alistair, thank you. Good evening. The Prime Minister has confirmed Christmas can go ahead as planned in England. Boris Johnson today ruled out tougher restrictions before the 25th of December. The Prime Minister saying there is still great uncertainty about hospital admission rates and the severity of the Omicron variant. He says the government will continue to monitor the situation very closely and may bring in new measures after Christmas.
Actually, we can't rule out any further measures after Christmas, and we're going to keep a constant eye on the data. But in view of the continuing uncertainty about several things, severity of Omicron, uncertainty about the hospitalisation rate or the impact of the vaccine rollout and the boosters, we don't think today that there is enough evidence to justify any tougher measures before Christmas.
Boris Johnson. Well, in Scotland, the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, has announced that from Boxing Day, all outdoor events will be limited to just 500 people. And it's going to be for a period of 3 weeks to help slow down the spread of the Omicron variant in Scotland. Nicola Sturgeon confirmed that that also means the cancellation of Edinburgh's world-famous Hogmanay Street Party. And she said football matches will also become effectively spectator-free. She stressed that advice for Christmas Day still stands, but family gatherings should be kept small and safe where possible.
A time when these services are already under severe pressure and also dealing with high staff absences, limiting large-scale events will help them focus on delivering essential services to the public. So I would ask the public, despite the disappointment I know this decision will generate, to please understand the reasons for it.
And as you were hearing from Alistair, £1 billion is being made available by the Treasury to support businesses most impacted by the Omicron variant across the UK. It's going to include £6,000 grants for hospitality and leisure firms in England. The government's also going to cover statutory sick pay for those who test positive or those who have to self-isolate. Some travel bosses claim they've been left in the cold. Labour have broadly welcomed the measures, but they say they should have been introduced earlier. Away from COVID, the man accused of fatally stabbing Sir David Amess and charged with terrorism offences has pleaded not guilty. The Conservative MP was killed during a constituency surgery in Essex in October. 25-year-old Ali Harbi Ali is charged with his murder and preparing acts of terrorism between May 2019 and September of this year. A full trial is due to be held in March. The Metropolitan Police have released CCTV images of a missing student called Harvey Parker. The 20-year-old was last seen outside the Heaven nightclub in central London in the early hours of Friday morning. Officers are appealing to anyone who may have seen him on the night of his disappearance or since to come forward. You're right up to date. Now back to Al Stewart.
Polly, thank you. So, another day, another dollar. Well, pounds actually, and 1 billion of them. Following yesterday's indecisive cabinet on the Omicron threat and what to do about it, as you will know, they settled for, well, keeping a close eye on it. The Chancellor, who opposed any tougher measures, actually then came up with a slightly different plan. He didn't want to curb our socialising or our mingling, but he did want to offer £1 billion in support to the increasingly worried hospitality sector. It seemed to me as if he'd been on the other side of the argument with Michael Gove and Sajid Javid and had voted for strict new restrictions and won and come up with the money. But he wasn't, and he didn't, and nor did they win. The truth is that Rishi Sunak is responding to folk who are doing the sensible thing voluntarily. They're cutting back on their festive celebrations, cancelling parties, dinners, and not going out for drinks with the gang. All very wise and probably the best way of curbing COVID. But for restaurateurs and publicans, it's another hammer blow. But this time there's a big difference. Under lockdown, we had no choice, and nor did they. This time, and right now, we're just being told to be sensible. And we are. These are voluntary recommendations, not tough new government edicts. In that sense, the problems that the hospitality sector are facing are more of our making than the government's. Now, the stooges among you, therefore, might say ministers are being overgenerous. You may have a point. As for the reaction, well, some on the hospitality sector have welcomed £1 billion of our money, taxpayers' money, calling it unprecedented. Others, not surprisingly, have said it simply isn't enough. A £6,000 claim, they've probably got a point. But a line has to be drawn somewhere, you'd have thought. Well, there are many yet more to come. Depending on what happens on the COVID front, the Chancellor said he would always respond proportionately and appropriately to the situation that we face. Mr. Sunak said he was keeping the situation under review and monitoring the data day by day, hour by hour. And he said the government ruled out nothing. Labour's shadow Treasury Minister Pat McFadden described Mr. Sunak's announcement as a holding package from a government court in a holding position. And Pat McFadden may have a point. Now, the taxpayer's already been tapped up for £370 billion since the pandemic took a grip, with job support schemes, furlough particularly, getting about a third of that. And of that total, around £300 billion was borrowed, an eye-watering sum that our heirs and successors will have to pay back, unless inflation wipes it out, in which case, economically, inflation will probably wipe out most of them as well. So, another £1 billion for the hard-pressed hospitality sector is but a drop in the ocean. But even that gives me 3 problems. While many hospitality and leisure firms have been hit by a collapse in bookings and reduced footfall due to people's fears over the spread of the Omicron variant, they haven't been closed by the government. We have simply stayed safe. If the government feels the need, nevertheless, to step in, will the loans and grants be properly policed? There is strong evidence of people ripping off government support schemes, especially at a time of crisis. It's our money, and it should be properly looked after. Second, is that it? No one knows. And so government support and borrowing are a bottomless pit. Borrowing is money that's happily lent by the banks and other international financial institutions at slowly increasing prices as interest rates rise. We, the taxpayer, pay that interest too. And thirdly, we have a government accused of either having too many plans for COVID, A, B, and the whispered C, or as Labour would have it, not enough plans. What I haven't heard is a word about the plan to restore the public finances and get the economy back on its feet when this ghastliness abates or shrinks to a manageable and acceptable level that can be coped with by sensible people. Is it not a time for a Mr. Micawber to leave the stage with his hopes that something will turn up and put someone there who really knows what they can do? We need to interrogate what we're doing now, like that extra cash for pubs and restaurants. And we need to have a clear vision for how we're going to get going again and begin to curb borrowing, cut taxes and start to pay down that colossal debt. Now, that would be a plan. So, for reaction to today's bailout, I'm delighted to be joined by political commentator Patrick O'Flynn. Patrick, good of you to join us this evening. Your initial judgment, using a very Boris Johnson word, caught my eye on social media. Do you think this is genuinely another waste of public money?
Well, I very much agree with the tenor of your video essay there, Alistair, that Rishi Sunak, most people would say, has done a good job supporting the economy during the pandemic, but the whole plan, the grand scheme, was to seamlessly rejoin to the normal private enterprise economy this autumn, having furloughed people, having kept businesses afloat, and then the economy could start generating wealth again and start getting that giant national debt, and you mentioned rightly, between £300 and £400 lumped on it, get that back under control. We're nearly 2 years in. We should have got to a position where the vaccination level meant we now assume the best rather than the worst. We should have expanded the NHS's capacity to flex upwards in the winter months. And it beggars belief that we're back into another cycle of government bailouts for businesses. And as you say, this time it's not edicts, this time it's advice and guidance. And I was particularly disturbed, Rishi Sunak, who presents himself as someone who doesn't believe the state should do anything, which he said at the end of his last budget, he didn't even acknowledge this is taxpayers' money. So I think the signal that's gone out to financial markets and to the wider public today is pretty disastrous.
Why do you think the government feels it can justify offering this money when, as I said in my introduction and you've just repeated, all of our reactions to it are in response to a suggestion, that dreadful thing, nudge politics, rather than an edict? The government has no legal responsibility for us not going to the pub or to a restaurant.
I think we're in a position where so much money has been spent that £1 billion has come to seem to this Chancellor like something he might find down the back of the sofa. There's the old joke in politics that, you know, £1 billion here, £1 billion there, and you're soon talking real money. I think he's probably hoping that this is the last lap of the track, that maybe with Omicron we will find out it is milder. And at the end of it, we look back on Omicron and we think it's given a lot of people natural immunity and that we don't reach this position again. But I'm rather fearful that we've instead got into a position where we have a government that assumes the worst, that genuflects to the public health advice, that doesn't measure the cost to the economy. And we're now stuck in a cycle. And I think perhaps it's only the British public that will break that cycle. But to take on an obligation for the taxpayer who's already under such strain, when it's not something that's been done by edict to the hospitality sector, I think is a very dangerous precedent. And I also think that just providing more and more loans and grants to businesses has kept what economists call zombie businesses alive. We need to have a marketplace out there again where the businesses that give the public what they want survive, grow and prosper, and the ones that don't will fold, as has always been the case. And that's really important under a capitalist system for good resource allocation and economic growth. And I'm afraid it's all getting rather ossified. And somebody else put out a tweet today, which I thought was very apt, that the best form of business support is known by the word consumers. Consumer choice needs to prevail again. And, I'm by no means a hardline, laissez-faire person on economics. But 2 years in, with deaths now running at 10% of what they were in the peak last January, this is the time, dare I quote Theresa May, that we've got to learn to live with COVID.
Yeah. Two final quick ones. Do you believe and fear, as I do, that we're getting close to the point of no return on the public finances? I mean, there is a diction to it, and they're just hoping that inflation will take it away. It is so profoundly un-Tory, but we have got to that point where it's just got so big that they try and look the other way.
I certainly think they're not fighting inflation as hard as they might be. They're still benefiting, I suppose, from low interest rates. And overall, in the big scheme of things, as I said at the outset, Sunak's done quite a good job keeping viable businesses alive and making sure that we didn't tip into a depression caused by a deficit in demand. So I don't entirely slate him, but I think he's obviously acting under heavy constraint from the decisions of the Prime Minister and people around him at the moment. So, yeah, I do fear that perhaps they want to use a bit of inflation without officially declaring that's the policy to shrink the real value of the public sector debt. And in any event, they're not prepared to grasp the nettle when the nettle is more graspable than it's been at any point in this pandemic.
Patrick Flynn, it's great to talk to you as always. Thank you very much indeed for those thoughts there. Patrick Flynn there, who used to be political editor of the Express and then moved into politics and is now a good commentator. Now, one man who will be eligible to receive a grant from the government is Alex Proud, who is the owner of Proud Cabaret in London and a regular guest on this channel and is one of our go-to level-headed commentators on this sort of thing. I'm assuming that part of my intro and what Paddy was just saying might have made you pretty angry, but let me take one genuine step back from that and ask you, do you feel entitled to this public money?
No, I think the whole point, some of the right things that were said then, is I'd rather have not a penny from the government and have a clear message telling the public that if they want to go out, it's their decision. That I've got right now a restaurant with 300 covers. I've got 150 people. I could have closed tonight like a lot of the West End because I'm losing money tonight. In fact, that £6,000 won't cover the money I lose tonight. But I feel I have a duty to my customers, to my staff, and to the West End, to London, to remain open and show some sense of this famous blitz spirit that London is apparently supposed to have so much of. I'm so angry at it because really all we want is a clear message from the government. Are we going to be open on New Year's Eve? Are we going to be open for the next 2 weeks? I had to yesterday order £30,000 worth of champagne for my 4 restaurants because the government won't tell if we're open or not. It was my last date. For all I know, on the 27th, bumbling Boris will tell me that I've wasted my money and I'll have 30 grand's worth of champagne burning a hole in my cellar. Well, I'll hopefully drink that over the month I'm closed. But I'm really frustrated. I don't want the taxpayers' money. I want to be able to trade, and I want the public to be able to make sensible decisions about their own risk. I can't bear this new country where we're told that we can't make our own decisions about our own safety. Right now, what's interesting is we have 3/3, a third of people have decided it's not safe to go out. They cancelled. A third of people are still here tonight, and a third aren't here because they're not sure the government will cancel. That's the third I'm annoyed about, because if Boris had given a clear message, I'd have another 100 customers tonight, and I wouldn't be losing the £6,000 Boris has been kind enough to pay me back, having lost me this month about £350,000 on top of the £1 million I lost last year.
Yeah, absolutely. Last night on this programme, we analysed that cabinet meeting and described it as being not yet, maybe keep an eye on things, nudge, nudge, and what have you. Let me take you to the money as well. You're a businessman first and foremost. Paddy Flynn just said the amount of money is ridiculous as well. It's the kind of down the back of the sofa money. I mean, £6,000 to you, and I don't mean this to be remotely rude, you're a very successful big business person. You've just been talking about 300 covers. If I offered you £6,000, you'd smile at me.
£6,000 tonight, it's an insult to our industry. Don't forget that Rishi last time round told our sector he wouldn't leave us standing. He did. He kept nightclubs shut and he never gave them anything more than £3,000 a month. That didn't pay most of their electricity bills. Insurance, by the way, doubled last year when we were closed. The insurance companies, having not paid out loss of business, then increased our premiums for being shut. You know, you do start to slightly believe in the conspiracy. I don't, but I'm frustrated at the nonsense that's been spoken. Rishi's never stood by the hospitality industry. Don't forget that the wonderful, wonderful way the government paid our staff's wages was us basically engaging in an unemployment benefit scheme for the government. I'm not even sure why we operated. I'm very glad my staff got paid by the government, but it didn't help our business. It didn't help me with £1 million worth of debt. And we're repaying that debt now and being shut again. And that's the problem right now, is that all of us are under massive financial stress already. And this lack of consumer confidence, the banks will pull away from their loans because they'll be nervous about our sector again. You're looking at a sector that employs 3 million people. It takes 70 billion a year. And the irony, Alistair, is this is one sector that does level up. 18-year-old kids behind that bar will be booting me out of my comfy seat in a couple of years. We do level up, and this sector will be ruined. And the horse has bolted. Why on earth didn't we push boosters in September? We knew this was coming. Boris knew it was coming. He didn't bother because he was too busy playing politics and worrying about his rubbish cabinet and the appalling cabinet ministers he has. And I'm just fed up with this. When is enough? When does Boris resign and have some pride in the shocking way he's handled this?
Final question, Alex. You are a successful restaurateur, but you're the kind of business guy who could have dabbled in any field and made a success of it. And in that context, let me ask you this. How confident are you of economic recovery? When, how, and led by whom?
I mean, what scares us all right now is a year ago, inflation was a word that I remember from the 1970s, as do you, Alistair. I remember 3-day weeks. I remember the horror of all that. And that was a distant memory a year ago. What scares the hell out of me, I'm sorry to use that word this early in the evening, is that inflation is back. That means all those interest payments are going to get very scary. And then suddenly the government doesn't have the ability to splash the cash. So you sit there and go, we have to live with COVID. People have to make their own decisions. We have to stop. As Theresa May, isn't it ironic how Conservative prime ministers are only ever good once they resign? Theresa May made the first intelligent statement I ever heard from her and pointed out that we have to learn to live with this. We can't keep shutting the economy down. You can't threaten people's jobs. And also the key point is, yes, we might save some lives, but then what are the lives lost by the NHS being treated like this, by closing the NHS down to other patients, by the psychological damage, by the thought that kids might be sent home again this term? I can't help thinking that these effects are worse than the effects of COVID. And let's face it, so far, this wave, and I have known quite a few people who have it, seems to induce an enormous amount of tiredness in people. And then 4 days later, they feel fine. I'm not entirely sure why we're so scared of this one, because it's exactly what they told us it would be. It will be more virulent, but it will be less severe. So can we not all calm down and start being sensible again and stop doing this? Because it's driving me nuts.
Alex Proud, total sanity from you, not nuts at all. Thank you very much indeed for your time. And hey, seriously, I wish you and your team every success fighting the good fight. And let's hope you get through it and are smiling on the other side of it. I hope you'll agree, a good conversation there from a political commentator, but also somebody from the front line there with what it's all about. It's not anti-Boris. It's not anti-Boris stuff, as people always tell me. It's anti a particular policy that doesn't make sense to a political commentator and doesn't make sense to a restaurateur there at the front line. Now, as we always say at GB News, we want to know what you think as well. And I wrote on my Twitter account just a few hours ago that this is what we'd be discussing this evening, the hospitality bailout, and plenty of you got back in touch to give me your views. And I just picked out, I think, 3 or 4, and I asked my producer and team to put them up there. One that immediately caught my eye came from Diana, who said, bearing in mind the pittance that most hospitality staff earn compared with company profits, I fear the only winners here will be the employers and the directors. Naomi joined in the conversation saying, don't think we should lock down again, Alistair. Most people are responsible. Exactly what my 2 guests were saying. We need a comprehensive and holistic view of all of the impacts, and £1 billion is but a token. Steve popped in with, nope, because they've said no changes, so there is no need to cancel Christmas events. And finally, George wrote, funny how they can find this money and yet deprive pensioners of the triple lock. We always love to hear from you, so always keep it coming in. gbviews@gbnews.uk. After the break, we'll be getting reaction to Nicola Sturgeon's decision to tighten the COVID restrictions in Scotland from Boxing Day. But first, time for the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. Some brighter skies for some tomorrow before more cloud and rain arrives from the west. However, backtrack to this evening and high pressure still firmly in charge, as it has been for the last week or so. And what that means, calm conditions and a cold night. But it is waning towards the near continent, allowing milder air to come from the west and also bands of rain. And we'll see that as we head through into Christmas Day. For the time being, though, it's cold outside. Holes in the cloud will allow temperatures to plummet. A fairly widespread frost anywhere from Scotland, England and some parts of Wales. Away from Northern Ireland and the West Country, a keen breeze here, more clouds and temperatures holding up. But certainly it's going to be a frosty start to the day come Wednesday morning across many areas, but with some hazy sunshine, so some brighter skies. Through the morning, though, that cloud will eventually bring some rain to Northern Ireland, quite a fresh wind across Irish Sea coast, as the rain slowly pushes up towards the western parts of Scotland, clipping West Wales as well as the West Country. Drier skies to end the day further east, but temperatures will struggle here, 4, 5, 6 degrees Celsius. And through the evening, as the rain pushes across Scotland, it will turn to snow above around 300-400 metres and even some sleetiness at lower levels for a time. As some showers move in across England and Wales, and then more wet weather returns to Northern Ireland through the latter part of Wednesday night and into Thursday morning. However, the key feature of the weather as we head through Thursday, yes, there'll be quite windy in places, outbreaks of rain, but the temperatures will be a few degrees higher, certainly feeling milder across England and Wales and Northern Ireland. Still a lot of rain, though, just grinding to a halt across Scotland, and a keen breeze across the far north as more rain pushes in across Wales and the West Country later, and also that brisk wind. Temperatures here, double figures though, so not so bad, although the air will slowly get colder from the north as we head into Christmas, with a chance of some snow showers in the northeast.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Four people smugglers have been jailed for a total of almost 36 years after they tried to bring 69 Albanian migrants to the UK on a converted fishing trawler. The boat was intercepted by UK Border Force officials in the North Sea last November. I'm delighted to be joined live in the studio now by our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, who is at Chelmsford Crown Court today. The case itself, clearly a very worrying development, but seen, I guess, by UK Border Force as something of a triumph now.
Yeah, a significant development for them and for the National Crime Agency, who are behind this operation and who were able to smash this people smuggling ring. They said it was a significant operation that would have netted them potentially many millions of pounds had it gone according to plan. This first run, for example, was going to net them over £1 million with the 69 migrants on board this converted fishing trawler charging about £15,000 or being charged about £15,000 each for that voyage across the North Sea, a 14-hour voyage to land them at Great Yarmouth. Alistair, I've been taking a closer look at this people smuggling operation. I feel I should, though, also just issue a little bit of a warning to those of a more nervous disposition. There's been quite a few people commenting today that there is a gentleman in this VT who, well, let's just say he's probably not in peak condition in his underpants. You'll see what I mean. It's coming up now. Tracked by a Coast Guard helicopter, this is the converted fishing trawler Svannik being buffeted by waves as it crossed the North Sea in November last year. But this boat's fishing days are long gone. Instead, packed into her hold are 69 Albanians being smuggled into the UK. The trawler never made it to its intended destination of Great Yarmouth. Intercepted by Border Force and the National Crime Agency, it was brought here to the port of Harwich. Some of the 69 migrants visible on the deck of the Svannik and on the dockside. The day before, she'd set off from Ostend in Belgium. These images, captured by one of the migrants on deck, shows just how rough the sea was during the 14-hour voyage. Authorities say those on board were in real danger. Most were below deck, but had the vessel encountered difficulties, there was only one lifeboat, which hadn't been serviced in years and was only capable of carrying 20 people. When they searched the boat, National Crime Agency officers found this laptop in the wheelhouse. It linked other organised criminal gang members to the people smuggling operation.
Police, can you open the door?
It's clear Lithuanian national Artūras Jucius wasn't expecting this early morning door knock at his South London home.
From the National Crime Agency. Okay. I'm here this morning to arrest you, all right, for the offence of conspiring to facilitate illegal entry into the UK.
A search of his phone found various audio messages as Artūras Jucius set up this operation, promising to smuggle 50 migrants a week into the UK once they got enough money to buy and convert the boat.
We're going to bring you every week 50 people. Just we need to invest now 40,000 if you want, 20 you, 20 me. From first trip, we're going to get that money back.
Juris and 4 other Eastern Europeans, all members of this organised crime group, have now been convicted and jailed for an operation the National Crime Agency said would have been highly lucrative for the gang. They charged their illegal passengers £15,000 each for the trip on this 60-year-old vessel. An inspection of the Svannik found she'd undergone a crude conversion to allow people to be carried in her hold. But conditions were filthy and cramped, and the fact there were only 20 life jackets on board showed how little regard the people smugglers had for the safety of their human cargo. Many thousands of people have arrived illegally into the UK this year on small boats across the English Channel. But while focus has understandably been on this growing crisis, organised criminal gangs have continued to expand their operations, looking for other routes into the UK. The commandeering of fishing boats like the Svannick to land migrants further up the coast and in rougher weather is now becoming increasingly common.
And that's exactly the thing that struck me, the fishing boats. This is now people smuggling on an industrial scale.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's clearly a big issue in terms of those coming across the channel from Calais and Dunkirk and alike every day. But what we're not seeing so much of, it's not being reported as much, but it is happening, are the organised criminal gangs just going that step further, becoming that bit more sophisticated, either buying themselves these old fishing boats and using them, or co-opting a fisherman, a skipper, to take a few €1,000 or a few £1,000 to smuggle migrants ashore. There have been a few incidents like that. And this one is a bit of a worry because the authorities were only really alerted to this Svannick because this organised criminal gang, well, they weren't all that organised. They couldn't navigate to save themselves. They ran this vessel aground twice in the weeks before.
More National Crime Agency than UK Border Force, then.
Yeah, indeed, yeah. So they ran the vessel aground a couple of times before the operation to take these migrants to Great Yarmouth. And that's what alerted the National Crime Agency, Swedish authorities, when they interviewed the crew on one of the groundings off Sweden. They said they were very evasive in their answers, so they put out an international alert to maritime agencies and the National Crime Agency here, of course, so that's how they got onto that. And, of course, the concern is there may well be other vessels out there that aren't drawing as much attention to themselves that may be getting through.
Well, brilliant work from you, and let's hope the bad guys are watching it as well as the good guys. Mark, thank you very much indeed. Now, if you live in Scotland, the good news coming out from Nicola Sturgeon's address at Holyrood this afternoon is that Christmas isn't cancelled. But from Boxing Day, there will be tighter COVID restrictions. The biggest casualty is Edinburgh's Hogmanay events, which have been cancelled for the second year in a row. What's more, any venue that sells alcohol will have to bring in table service from the 27th of December. All sports matches will effectively be spectator-free, which means the game between Celtic and Rangers on January the 2nd, that should have had a crowd of 60,000, will now be played in front of empty stands. The new restrictions will be in place for at least 3 weeks. For reaction to those announcements, I'm delighted to be joined now by the former MSP, Brian Monteith. Brian, cancelling Hogmanay and shrinking the Old Firm derby is either very bold or daft. Where do you stand?
Well, personally, I think it's daft. What I would say is COVID is not hanging around at Christmas thinking I'll pull up my britches and get out there after Boxing Day. So if there is genuinely a problem, if this new variant is actually as highly transmissible as is being said, and I've no reason to doubt it, then why are they not acting sooner? It's because they can't afford to, because they know it will be unpopular, so they choose to come in on Boxing Day for probably 3 weeks, as you said. Now, of course, what this tells us is this is politicians doing things to show that they can be seen to be doing things. It's not because of the science, because we don't really know enough about this variant at the moment. And what we do know is that if you actually stop people going to football matches, they will go to other ways of seeing it. So, for instance, you can actually be in a pub watching it with 100 other people, and so only take six pubs or so, and you're already over the number of the limit that's allowed at a football match of 500. What would have been smarter is to speak to the football authorities and bring forward the winter break that Scottish football has, so that the matches are postponed. The fans can then go to the matches when they do happen. And the small games, the teams like Stirling Albion, Stenhousemuir, Edinburgh City, who never get huge crowds, who could have spectators within these new rules, would then actually get some revenue.
Sure. Brian, let me take you back to the midpoint, because I completely agree. I was going to ask you a question that if there's a risk come Boxing Day, there's certainly a risk right now. But also you said something in the middle of that, so it's that old word procrastination again. Nicola Sturgeon seems to me, therefore, to be misreading the room, because so many Scots, particularly younger Scots, to them, Hogmanay is even more important than Christmas.
Hogmanay has always been more important in Scotland. Indeed, it's still, my parents still remember when they would work on Christmas Day in the mornings, and it was an afternoon off. Hogmanay was always the big thing. And of course, the official organisation of parties will not take place. But who's to stop people actually assembling in the streets? What actually is there going to be? Some sort of police state to stop people giving each other a hug and having a nip out of a bottle? All sorts of things can go on, and the government won't be able to stop it. And there is the possibility that people will just simply say, enough is enough. We'll see you down the road at the corner of the street or in the town square or whatever. It won't be an official event. It will just be what Hogmanay used to be like.
Quick one, Brian. There's often a sense in Scotland that opposition and political commentary is divided down political lines, but it's very clear that Boris Johnson's Conservative Party here is very much divided on what next to do. Are the SNP as well? Is Nicola out on her own on this, or are they united behind the leader?
Well, of course, the SNP actually has a Stalinist rule that does not allow public criticism from elected members of its own government, its own party and other elected members. So you won't hear it. But yes, people are getting the feedback that it's unpopular. And of course, that's why they've not banned Christmas, so to speak. But the fact is, people see how daft it is. They watched what happened with COP26 in Glasgow. Thousands of people from the establishment milling about. And now when it comes to Hogmanay, it's the People's Festival, they're being told to stay indoors.
Brian Monteith, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. And I should simply point out to folk at home, on the basis of balance, that the accusations of Stalinism and control of voice are Brian's views, and the SNP are not here to answer them, but I'm sure that they would deny it. After the break, a leading Catholic figure tells us why COVID should not lead to churches closing their doors this Christmas.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show, Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
For Christians of all persuasions, Christmas has a profound significance. For many, in truth, it's the only time they go to church, save weddings and funerals. But throughout the last 18 months, lots of other events that would usually happen in places of worship have had to be cancelled. Weddings, funerals, Easter, and even Christmas last year. For many, churches are not only places of worship, but also places to meet, to socialise, and to learn. That's why people like former Bishop Michael Nazir Ali is urging churches to remain open in the face of further restrictions, and I'm delighted to say that he joined me now. Brilliant piece in the Telegraph this morning, if I may say so, but share with me and the folk at home why you feel it is profoundly important that these places of worship remain open.
Well, I think you've summed it up very well, Alistair. I think these places are very important places, not just for meeting and for socializing, but to seek help. I mean, people who need company, who need to talk to someone. I have noticed throughout this period that people are coming back to church, and churches have so many events at this time of the year. They have crib and christingle services for children, so many school events, carol concerts, often organized by people at the workplace. And then, of course, there's midnight mass. I was so sorry to hear from a number of places that midnight mass has been cancelled. Now, that is when the churches are packed to the gunnels, as I've said. People queuing outside to get into church. I mean, where did you last see that? And to cancel that, I mean, once you do that, people will not come back easily. So we have to be very careful about what we are doing.
You also argue in the article, and it's particularly pertinent in the current public debate, you talk about the removal of civil liberties. And the right to worship is a profound and fundamental civil liberty to many. So how important is the premise of having the freedom to go to church and worship in this current climate?
Yes, and the freedom to worship is part of a wider freedom to believe and freedom of expression, freedom to gather. And when the government closed places of worship last time, and some churches went even further and prohibited their own clergy even to enter their churches, many of us made a protest about this and said this wasn't right. And to give the government credit, they have not repeated this. But what seems to be happening is that people are going beyond the guidelines, even beyond what the government has suggested. And there seems to be a sort of spirit of fear, which is not justified by the data about this new variant. Of course, we have to be careful. Of course, it seems that it is more transmissible than other variants. But the data also show that it is the disease that it causes is mild for most people. And that there are fewer deaths. I mean, that's the evidence from South Africa. And yet we seem to be responding in a way that seems over the top. So that, I mean, I've heard it said that even if it is mild for most people and only a very small number get seriously ill, that will still overwhelm the National Health Service. Well, you have to ask what sort of National Health Service we've got then. I mean, what has been planned in the last 2 years? And my concern is that once these basic freedoms are lost, we get used to not having them, then they can be forgotten. And even if some of them return, there will be other excuses, perhaps of security or scarcity, to reduce them and to deny us those freedoms.
Finally, Bishop Michael, and it's crossed my mind many times over the last couple of years, when I personally am feeling really seriously down, apart from my beloved family, I find solace in the beauty of Winchester Cathedral, in solitude. At a time like this, it's more than just praying, isn't it? It's about being in a place of solitude, of support, and moral uplift.
Yes, some people, like the poet Philip Larkin, go into churches when there's no one else there. And I mean, that's very important for churches to remain open for reflection, for meditation, for prayer. But some, of course, go there for company. And that also is very important if they can't find that company anywhere else.
So, Michael, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. And God bless you and have a great Christmas. Thank you very much indeed. That's Dr. Michael Nazir Ali, former bishop, and still a powerfully brilliant practicing man of faith. Now, a little before midnight and the start of a new year, a familiar sound will echo across London and from televisions and radios across the land for the first time in 4 years. It is the peal of bells, the Westminster quarters, that build up to the first of 12 single chimes from Big Ben. The Tower and Big Ben are part of a new palace built following a catastrophic fire in 1834. Although the competition to design the new palace was won by establishment figure Charles Barry, Barry employed the runner-up, Augustus Welby Pugin, to do the clock tower, the fixtures and fittings throughout the two Houses of Parliament, even the wonderful tiles that still cover the public walkways of that palace. Pugin was just 23, a maverick of his times, a master of his trade, and a hero of mine. To discuss this, I'm delighted to be joined by Ike Ije, who is an architect, a guide, and an author. Big Ben's the bell, but the tower is just magnificent in my view.
It is. I agree. And I think many millions, around billions maybe, around the world would agree with you, because it's one of the most recognizable buildings on Earth. And it is a beautiful work of architecture. And I think we should be very, very proud of it.
It's really strange, though, that a huge architect, particularly a man of the establishment like Barry, gave such a key job to the runner-up, a collaborator.
It is. Well, I mean, as with all these things, there's a bit of kind of political dark elements happening there. I think Pugin had actually won the competition, but it wasn't acceptable for somebody of his age to design such an important building. So Barry was given the commission, but it was essentially going along with decorative elements that Pugin had designed. So in many ways, yes, it's a collaboration between the two of them, but if we're looking for who's responsible for the kind of decorative spirit of the building, it's very much Pugin.
And we're just looking at pictures of the lovely blue tint that is used on the hands.
Yes.
I mean, you know a million tons more than I do about this, but I'm told that essentially the final result was a fusion of Barry's more classic architecture and Pugin's brilliant neo-Gothic tastes.
It is, yeah. And I mean, if you look at the Palace of Westminster, it immediately looks like a Gothic building. It's got spires and pinnacles, arches. That's the kind of overwhelming kind of impression it gives. But if you look closely, it does many things that Gothic buildings shouldn't do, such as it's fairly symmetrical in plan. Gothic buildings aren't symmetrical. And it's quite rational as well. It's quite geometric in its kind of elevation and ordering. And those things aren't really Gothic, but that gives you an example of the kind of collaboration between the two. So Barry did the planning, but the decoration, the Gothic spirit, that kind of Gothic, also religious style as well, very importantly, that was very much all from Pugin.
Yeah, and Pugin certainly extremely well known for the churches that he's designed all over the place. The final point, and I said you're an author, you're an architect, practicing architect, but you also guide people and tell them where to go and look. the other thing that has always moves me deeply when I go to the Palace of Westminster, which is quite often, is the Great Hall, which takes us back another 600 years, and those beautiful beams and the simplicity of the floor and the wall. I mean, that has to be one of the most precious spaces in London.
It is. In the country, I would say, and it's a shame. I know it is nominally open to the public, but not as many people have seen it as I think should do, because it is a spectacular work of architecture. And if you think that when that was begun, I mean, it was begun in the 11th century. To build something of that scale and that beauty and that decoration at that time, it just leaves you in awe and wonder of what medieval craftsmen were able to do. So, I mean, if I had my own way, I'd have far more people visiting the Palace of Westminster than's currently the case. It's not my purview, but it'd be wonderful if people could even go up into the tower, Elizabeth Tower, see the workings of the bell. And it's our building. It's a building that represents Britain. And I think as many people should not just look at it from the bridge, but go inside it and experience what a wonderful piece of architecture it is.
Totally 100% agree with you. And at the other tower, the Victoria Tower, there are original copies of every Act of Parliament going all the way back. I'll tell you what. Let's book you and we'll have another conversation about our favourite bits of London architecture. A real pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much. That's it for tonight. I'm back at 8 o'clock again tomorrow. Dan Wootton is here from 9 o'clock. But first, let's bring you right up to date with the weather. From me, a very good night to you.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. Some brighter skies for some tomorrow before more cloud and rain arrives from the west. However, backtrack to this evening and high pressure still firmly in charge, as it has been for the last week or so. And what that means, calm conditions and a cold night. But it is waning towards the near continent, allowing milder air to come from the west and also bands of rain. And we'll see that as we head through into Christmas Day. For the time being, though, it's cold outside. Holes in the cloud will allow temperatures to plummet. A fairly widespread frost anywhere from Scotland, England and some parts of Wales. Away from Northern Ireland and the West Country, a keen breeze here, more clouds and temperatures holding up. But certainly it's going to be a frosty start to the day come Wednesday morning across many areas, but with some hazy sunshine, so some brighter skies. Through the morning, though, that cloud will eventually bring some rain to Northern Ireland, quite a fresh wind across Irish Sea coast, as the rain slowly pushes up towards the western parts of Scotland, clipping West Wales as well as the West Country. Drier skies to end the day further east, but temperatures will struggle here, 4, 5, 6 degrees Celsius. And through the evening, as the rain pushes across Scotland, it will turn to snow above around 300-400 metres and even some sleetiness at lower levels for a time. As some showers move in across England and Wales, and then more wet weather returns to Northern Ireland through the latter part of Wednesday night and into Thursday morning. However, the key feature of the weather as we head through Thursday, yes, there'll be quite windy in places, outbreaks of rain, but the temperatures will be a few degrees higher, certainly feeling milder across England and Wales and Northern Ireland. Still a lot of rain, though, just grinding to a halt across Scotland, and a keen breeze across the far north as more rain pushes in across Wales and the West Country later, and also that brisk wind. Temperatures here, double figures though, so not so bad, although the air will slowly get colder from the north as we head into Christmas, with a chance of some snow showers in the northeast.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for